Hello, this is Brian Foster, and today I'm talking about Spiritism. Today is October the 10th, 2021, and we are going through the Spiritist Review of 1858. And we're going through as I pick in sequence as I pick things. There's a lot of things in this book that aren't really relevant. They're just notes on the Spiritist organization that Allan Kardec set up. So I'm just trying to pick out what I think is relevant and interesting to people who are interested in Spiritism. It's just fascinating. These are the first, some of the other writings, and you see some of these writings that are put into the Spirit's book or the Gospel according to Spiritism, and you'll see a lot of this. So today we're going to go over Mademoiselle Clairon and the Phantom, the moral dissertation about greed, and the evocation of Miss Clary D, who died at age 13. So I hope this might be interesting for you. Now, before I begin, if you are interested in Spiritism, I recommend that you get the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. Allan Kardec codified the Spirits book by talking to different mediums, used the same question to different mediums, and did not put them in the book unless the answers were the same or very similar. You can also, I have that also on my YouTube channel, which you're on now, or it could be on now, it could be a BitChute or Rumble. I'm on both other channels in case for some reason YouTube stops me from speaking, which they stop a lot of people now. There's a lot of heavy censorship. So you can, but I also have on the YouTube, I have a playlist called The Spirits Book where I read every chapter. You can also go to my website, nwspiritism.com, and download the MP3 format file, or it's an MP4 something. I forgot what it is, which is an Audible type format where you can save where you were and so forth. It's 2 files. It's pretty big, but you can download that for free. So all that information on Spirits Book is there. Okay, let's get to what we're talking about today. This is Madame Clairon and the Phantom. Now, this was written 1858. So this is what Allan Kardec wrote. This story caused uproar in its time by the position of the hero lady and by a large number of persons who witnessed it. Despite its singularity, it would have been probably forgotten had Mademoiselle Clairon not published it in her memoirs. This is where we extracted the report below. The analogy it has with some of the current facts gives it a natural place in this collection, meaning the magazines on Spiritism. Mademoiselle Clairon was not only known for her beauty, but also for her talent as a singer and actress in tragic roles, and this would be in Paris, France. She had inspired a young Breton, Mr. S., in one of these passions, understanding that he did not possess the necessary talents to fully succeed in his passion. Mademoiselle Clairon only corresponded with her friendship. Nevertheless, Mr. S.'s presence had become such an annoyance that he decided to break up the relationship for good. Heartbroken, he experienced a long lasting illness, which killed him in 1743. Here is how Mademoiselle Clairon described it. It was 2.5 years since the day we met and the day he died. He sent for me asking for my kind acceptance of seeing him over his last moments. My relationships did not allow me to do that. He did die having only servants around him and an old lady who was his only companion for a long time. He lived in the Rampart near Chaussée d'Antin, where they had started to build. I lived at Rue de Bussy, near the Rue de Seine and Saint-Germain Abbey. I was with my mother and several friends just having dinner. I had just sung beautiful pastoral songs, which delighted my friends, when, at 11 o'clock sharp, we heard a piercing scream. Its somber modulation and duration shocked everyone. I felt like passing out, and indeed, I was unconscious for about 15 minutes. My whole family, friends, neighbors, and police would hear the same scream, always at the same time, coming from the bottom of my window as if vaguely came through the air. I rarely had dinner in the city, but during those days nothing would be heard, and many times when asking my servants and my mother for any news, on returning to my room, the scream would blast right in the middle of the group. On one occasion, I had dinner with the president of B, who wanted to kindly follow me home to ensure that I would be safe. We got to the house by the door. He was saying goodbye to me when the scream blew between the two of us. Just as the whole of Paris was aware, he knew about the screams, but he still had to be helped to his carriage, looking more dead than alive. Still, on another occasion, I asked my good friend Rosalie to join me on a shopping tour to Rue Saint Honore, looking for fabrics. The only subject of our conversation was my phantom, as he was called. This very talented young man would not believe in any of those things, but he was impressed by my adventure. He requested that I should evoke the phantom, saying that he would then believe if the phantom responded. Be it by weakness or audacity, I did what he asked me. The scream was heard 3 times, and it was horrifying for its loudness and speed. On returning home, we needed the support of several people to remove us from the carriage, as both of us were unconscious. After this event, I heard nothing for some months. I thought the situation was definitely over. What a mistake. So we read about these type of things, and even in our present times. I'll carry on. Every spectacle had been transferred to Versailles for the wedding of Delphine. A room was organized for me at St. Cloud Avenue, which I shared with Miss Granville. At 3 a.m., I said to her, "It is the end of the world. It would really be difficult that scream would find us here." It then blasted. Miss Granville thought our room was in hell. Dressed in evening gown, she ran away from top from top to bottom of the stairs. Nobody could sleep that night. At least it was the last time we heard it. 7 or 8 days later, on talking to people whom I was acquainted, the 11 o'clock tick-tock was followed by a musket gunshot from one of my windows. We all heard the noise and saw the fire, but the window was intact. We concluded that I was a missed target, that we should take better precautions in the future. Mr. Marvelin, then the police commissioner, requested that all houses near the street from my own house should be searched. The street was full of all types of spies, but regardless of how much care was taken, for 3 consecutive months those shots were seen and heard, always at the same hour of the day, at the same spot of the window, without anybody being able to identify its real origin. This fact was duly registered by the police. So she has some backup. Once, already accustomed to my phantom, whom I considered a poor devil limited to his own wickedness, I did not take notice of the time. As it was a hot day, I opened the deplorable window, talking to the officer at the balcony. At 11 o'clock sharp, a gunshot was heard, and both of us were thrown to the floor, in the middle of the room where we fell like the dead. On recovering our senses, we both noticed that both of us had faces unbelievably slapped, him on the left face and me on the right one. We laughed like crazy. 2 days later, I was invited by Mademoiselle Dumasnil to attend the evening party at her house. I took a carriage at 11 o'clock with my chambermaid. The moonlight was beautiful, and we were taken through boulevards lined by houses. The maid said, "Wasn't it here that Mr. S. died?" According to the information I was given, yes, it must have been here, I answered, pointing towards one of the 2 houses across from where we were. A gunshot was fired from one of the houses. It went through our carriage. The scared coachman drove fast ahead, thinking that some thieves were assaulting us. We arrived at our destination, just recovered from the incident. As I must confess, for a long time I had that look on horror in my face. However, that event was the last with a firearm. Those explosions were followed by the clapping of hands with a certain rhythm and repetition. This noise, to its kindness my audiences had been accustomed to, went undetected for some time, but my friends noticed them. They said, "We have been watching. It is 11 o'clock near your door that it happens. We hear, but we do not see anybody. It can only be the continuation of those events." As the noise was not so bad, I did not keep track of its duration. I did not give attention either to the harmonious sounds that were heard later. It sounded like a celestial voice giving the chords of an aria about to be sung. That voice would start at the Bussy quarters and stop at my door, as it happened before with all the other noises. It was heard, but nothing could be seen. Just over 2.5 years later, everything stopped at last. Sometime later, Mademoiselle Clairon had, through the old lady who was the only companion of Mr. S., the following reports about his last moments. He was counting the minutes, she said, when at about 10:30 the servant came to tell him that you would not come. After a moment of silence, he took my hand on a desperate impulse that scared me and said, "What a cruelty! She will not gain anything from that. I will hound her as much as in death as in life." I tried to calm him down, but he was already dead. In the edition we have in hand, the following note without signature precedes the story. This is a very singular antidote and has provoked and will provoke the most diverse opinions. We love the marvelous even when we do not believe in it. Mademoiselle Clairon seems convinced of the facts that she describes. We shall satisfy ourselves with the observation that at the time she was or thought she was tormented by her phantom, she was 22 and a half to 25 years old, which is the age of inspiration, whose faculty she constantly exercised and exalted through in her lifestyle in and out of the theater. It is also necessary to remember that in the beginning of her memoirs, she said that in her infancy she was entertained by adventures of apparitions and witches that, as she was told, were all real stories. We only know from the facts that the descriptions of Mademoiselle Clairon, thus we can only judge by induction. Well, this is our thought. Described by Mademoiselle Clairon, this is Allan Kardec writing, herself, the fact that has more authenticity than if it was reported by others. Besides, when she wrote the letter where these facts are described, she was 60 years old, hence she was beyond the age of credulity mentioned by the author of the note. The author does not question the good faith of Mademoiselle Clairon with respect to her adventure, only admits that she might have been the victim of an illusion. And of course, you hear that all the time. This hallucination or illusion. Had it been happening once, there is nothing extraordinary in it. But as it happened for 2.5 years, and it seems more difficult to us. Even more difficult to suppose that such an illusion might have been shared by so many people, audible and visual witnesses of the facts, including the police itself. So let's talk about this for a bit. I have seen, let's talk about first of all, on his deathbed where he wanted revenge. I have been at a medium's meeting with a spirit came and talked, and then it came to the meeting, and it was a woman, and she said, Zika, Zika, Zika. This is like 4 years ago. This is the time when Zika was happening. People were dying of Zika in Brazil. And this was in a mediums meeting in the Spiritist Center in Rio de Janeiro. And the consoler medium talked to the trance medium. The trance medium is where the spirit talks through that medium. Says, well, what's happened? What's the matter? He goes, I died of Zika, but I wanted my neighbor to die of Zika. I hated her, and I still want her to die of Zika. So here is the spirit hating a person and wanting revenge. And of course, we see that a lot of times. We also see that with obsession, where spirits want revenge against something that person did either in their present life or their past life. So that happens. And then there's also where she's, Mademoiselle Clairon heard the noise, heard the shot. She was even slapped, and there were witnesses around. Well, there is this report of when they were digging one of the tunnels, one of the underground tunnels, subways in London, and this group of workers were building the underground tunnel, and they saw a Roman troop march through, kind of like out of one wall, a little bit down to the next wall. And again, this can't be true. But then it's interesting. This is how good the British are. They had a historian talk to them and say, what did you see? And they described small things on their kit, right? They're like their backpack. I don't know what it's called for Roman, and things they held on their belts. And the historian said, these people would not know that. This is like even most of the populace, the vast majority of the populace would not know the individual things that a Roman soldier would carry with him as he was on the march. So these things happen, and it shows that there is a connection. There are communications between our world, our physical world, and the world on the other side, the world beyond the veil, as many have called it. And what's interesting about it is that our world, in fact, the spirits have said this, our world is like the people on the surface of the ocean talking to people deep into the ocean. And how much do they hear? How much do they understand? And do they have the frame of reference to understand what they are hearing, or even seen. Because we in the physical world live in a 3D world, right? Height, width, and length. And then there's time as the fourth dimension, but time moves on. Whereas in the spirit world, there is no time. In fact, what you see is you see an object, you see before what made the object, and then you see a little bit after the object. It's like when a higher spirit sees us, the higher spirit will see what we are going to be doing in certain parts of the future. The lower spirit sees less, a higher and higher spirit sees more of what we're going to be doing in longer into the future. So these are things that you have to ask yourself. And these are the little questions that people get interested in the spirit world. And also then people get interested in the spirit world because they have their own little episode, their own, the Uncle Bob said this, which came true, or Aunt Edna said, something else, and then I saw Aunt Edna in a vision. So these things that make us question what our current popular culture, who tries to tell us that we are nothing but carbon-based entities, that would we die, we disappear forever. Right? That is not true. And in fact, what spirits say that if you believe too much that when you die you will be asleep forever, it will be a lot of trouble for them to wake you up, because you will be just as you were when you die. You wake up and you think you're still alive. You're lighter, you're less dense, and if you walk over to your house, you'll talk to them, but they won't even know you're there. But anyway, let me carry on. Knowing what can happen in Spiritist manifestations as we do, the adventure has nothing of surprising, and we accept it as likely. With that hypothesis, we do not hesitate that the author of those malevolent acts is nobody else but Mr. S, particularly if we notice the coincidence of her words with the duration of the phenomena. He had said, "I will hound her as much in death as in life." Well, his relationship with Mademoiselle Clairon had lasted 2.5 years, which was the same time period of the produced manifestations. That's an interesting observation. Continuing with the nature of the spirit, he is not bad, and it is with reason that Mademoiselle Clairon classifies him as a poor devil, but one cannot classify him as personified benevolence. The violent passion that he experienced as a man proves that earthly ideas prevail on him. The profound traces of that passion which survived the destruction of his body prove that as a spirit he was still under the influence of matter. His vengeance, as harmless as it appeared, denotes non-elevated feelings. It is then to refer to our table of classifications of spirits. It would be not difficult to determine his class. The absence of real meanness separate him from the last class of the impure spirits, but he evidently had much of the other classes of the same order, as nothing in him could justify a superior position. Again, so this is, I mean, how many people pass over and still are attached, right? Every time we love something, we love an object, it's another tether to the earth, and it's harder for us to leave the earth and become superior, spiritually elevated, when we have all these anchors to objects. In one of the books by Chico Xavier and Andre Louis series, there is this spirit of this woman. It was in a museum, and she just hung around. I believe it was a mirror, and she loved that mirror. And the mirror was was in an object in the museum, and she had followed that object. Or may have been a picture. I forgot what it was, but she had followed that object around because she was tied to that object. And all she was doing by doing that is holding back her own spiritual elevation. She was learning nothing. And just like this poor guy for 2.5 years was bothering Mrs. Clarion every day, that how did that help him? He didn't. He learned nothing about the spirit world. He learned nothing about the superiority of the higher spirits. He learned nothing about service. He learned nothing about volitation, where you can move by thought. He trapped himself by his own uh, primitive passions. And this is something we all want to try and not let that happen. And of course, it happens to all of us sometimes. Something happens and we just dwell on a subject or a person. And that is where we really have to fight that. We have to get ourselves, okay, it's not that important. We have to think about, we should pray and we should meditate, or we should do some hobby. Just get your mind off whatever that is obsessing you at the time. Because inferior spirits may use that to amplify your obsession. And it may just be because they're out for revenge, or it may just because out of perverse sense of amusement. So don't let that happen to you. If someone did something to you, or you lost something, or your favorite motorcycle burned up, like happened to me one time. It was just sitting in a shed, and something it went up in flames. Don't pine for it to say, oh, okay, it's just a material object, or that person is learning and I'll learn from it. Try and rise above any of those primitive passions. It will make a difference. It makes you calmer and less able to lose your temper as you go through life. And when you have less stress, you will have much better health. Okay, we carry on. Noticeable is also the succession of modes through which he manifested his presence. On the very day and exact moment of his death, he made himself heard for the first time in the middle of a pleasant dinner. When alive, he used to see Mademoiselle Clairon with an imaginary aura involving the object of his keen passion. However, since the separation of his soul from material covering, the illusion gave rise to reality. There he is by her side, seeing her surrounded by friends, everything firing up his jealousy. Her singing and happiness sound like an insult to his desperation, which is translated as a scream of hatred repeated every day at the same time, as if to blame her for having refused to bring him some consolation in his last moments. The screams are succeeded by the gunshots, certainly harmless, but no less capable of showing his powerless hate and desire to disturb her rest. Later, his desperation takes a more tranquil form, evolving, no doubt, to healthier ideas, seemingly having taken sides. What remains are his memories of the applause directed to her, thus he repeats it. Even later, he seems to say farewell with those harmonious sounds were like an echo of the melodious voice that had him so much enchanted. So probably this spirit, Mr. S, was helped by other spirits. Finally, to get an idea that to forgive and to move on is helpful to himself and to the people on earth. And that is how, and she did nothing wrong. She was completely innocent of anything that could have said that she was mean to him. That I believe, not that I know for sure, but that's what I believe. But these things work both ways. And this is why that when someone dies and you still feel like, oh, I can't live without them, please come back to me. This is horrible. You left me. You need to be with me. That affects them almost the same way as he affected her. It affects the spirit in the spirit world. It keeps them from rising up and being comfortable and learning about the new world, where they're being pulled by this emotion sequence. Thought is action. Now, we don't see in our physical world much where we think thought is action, but it does have power. Not as much power as if you were a higher spirit, where you could build a house or build a mountain, or move a mountain, as Jesus said. Faith will move mountains, and it will in the spirit world. It will also create mountains and lakes and streams and planets. So that's why it's important of what you think. And this is really the secret of why we're on earth. And the secret of why we're on earth is to change our personality and character, to remove our primitive passions and replace them with civilized, to remove anger, hatred, jealousy, pride, selfishness, and replace them with love, charity, fraternity, and honesty. Then learn to listen to our conscience. And when you push off and replace those primitive emotions with civilized emotions, you don't get into these problems. These problems are just like little stones in your way, and you just walk over them, and they're not that big of a deal. But when you dwell on any small little thing that you think is hurt your pride or someone that disrespected you, well, then all these stones become big rocks, and they actually stand as obstacles for your spiritual enlightenment. And that's why you want to forgive everybody. That's why Jesus said forgive 70 times 70. Not only do they mean that, there's a twofold message in that. One is, if you are like this guy, Mr. S, if you concentrate on hating someone, you're going to do the same thing in the spirit world. And also, you also want, if someone hates you for some reason, try and reconcile with that person, because they could try and obsess and get revenge on you when you're on the physical world, or if you're in the spirit world. There's stories on both. So these are all to help for you. And the spirit world does not want unresolved conflicts. They want to resolve the conflicts. Okay, let's go to the next thing, which is greed. It's a moral dissertation dictated by the spirit of St. Louis to Mrs. Hermance de Fall. Probably pronouncing that wrong. This was on January 6, 1858. This is what he said. Listen to me, you. One day, two children of the same father received a bushel of wheat each. The older brother locked his wheat in a remote place. The younger found a poor man in his way, begging for money. He swiftly gave him half of the wheat he received, pouring it on the man's mantle. Then he moved on, sowing the remaining seeds about his father's field. Over that time, there was a terrible hunger, and the birds from the sky were found dead on the pathways. The older brother rushed to his hiding place, only to find dust. The younger one was sadly contemplating his dry wheat when he noticed a poor man who had once helped. Brother, said the beggar, I was dying and you helped me. Now that hope is dried in your heart, follow me. Your half bushels yielded 5 times more in my hands. I will give you food and you will live in abundance. Listen to me, you stingy. Do you know happiness? Yes, don't you? Your eyes shine with dark reflections in the orbits deeply carved by greed. Your lips clasp, your nostrils dilate, and your ears are attentive. Yes, I hear. It is a jingle of gold that your hand caresses by pouring in your box. You say, what a supreme ecstasy! Silence, someone is coming. Quickly, shut it up. Oh, how pale you are. Your whole body shakes. Control yourself. The footsteps move away. Open it. Look once more. It is your gold. Open it. Do not be afraid. You are quite alone. Do you hear? It's nothing. It's the wind moving through the cracks. Look, how much gold. Plunge your hands. Sound the metal. You are happy. Happy you, but you cannot rest at night, and ghosts invade your sleep. You are cold. Get closer to the fireplace. The fire crackles. So happily warms you up. Snow falls. The cold traveler involves himself in his coat. The poor is shivering under the rags. The flame of the fire diminishes. Throw on more wood. No, stop. It's your gold blazing with that wood. It is your gold that you burn. You are hungry. Look, take it. Satisfy yourself. All this is yours. You paid with your gold. With your gold, the abundance disgusts you. Will the superfluous be needed to maintain life? No, this piece of bread will be enough. Too much still. Your clothes fall in tatters. Your health cracks and threatens to ruin you. You will suffer cold and hunger, but who cares? You have gold. Miserable, death will separate you from this gold. You will leave it by the edge of your grave as the dust shaken by the traveler at the door, where the loving family awaits to celebrate the expected return. Your weakened blood, aged by your voluntary misery, has frozen in your veins. Eager hairs throw your body into a corner of the cemetery. Behold, you are now face to face with eternity. Miserable, what have you done to that gold that has been entrusted to you to relieve the poor? You hear these blasphemies. You see these tears. You see this blood. These are the blasphemies of the sufferings that you could have alleviated. These are the tears you caused, the blood you shed. You horrify yourself. You wish you could escape, but you cannot. You suffer desperately. Your suffering contorts you. Suffer. There will be no mercy for you. You had no compassion on your unhappy brother. Who would have for you? Suffer. Suffer always. Your punishment will never end. To punish you, God wants you to believe so. So, let's talk about this. So we talk about is what it is to be a miser and to believe that gold is everything, and that when you can't take your wealth with you. And he says, suffer always. Of course, no one suffers always. And then at the end, he says, God wants you to believe so. And that is the suffering. When people go down into the lower zone of the dark abyss, which is a hell or type of purgatory, they believe they will be there forever. And that is part of, and no one tells them differently. But as soon as they look up to the light and they say, these people that are around me, they're mean to me. And they finally get the idea that, well, they're there because they were acting towards other people. As these people are acting towards you. And then they start asking for mercy from God and from Jesus, and then we'll be given it. Now, the other thing is these people who are misers and they're tied to wealth. There's so many people that die and are tied to wealth in our present world. And it helps you not. We're not on earth to have the biggest yacht or the most house or the best car or even the best tennis shoes. We are on earth, as I said before, to modify our personality and character. That's why we're on a planet of atonement. We are going to a planet of regeneration. But right now we're on a planet of atonement and we're getting better. But the planet of atonement is where you live your life and you go through trials and tribulations because of karma, because of what you've done in the past. So if you had done something bad to someone in the past, someone's going to do something to you. Maybe not in the same way. There's always the spirit world is really smart, and they may have done something where they absolutely did something you did before, but you didn't learn the lesson. So now they'll try something a little different. Spirit world will never give up on you. It's like a student who refuses to learn. A good teacher will find just different ways to get that person to want to learn, because you can't force somebody to learn. You can't say you must be good. Okay, I'll be good. No, that doesn't work. It's like when people say, and they also write to me, well, why does God let all this suffering? Why doesn't they come and say, here, I'm God, or I'm Jesus. Look at me. I can do anything. Well, if that happened, what do you think our response will be? We will listen. We'll go, oh, we better be good, or we're going to suffer. We're going to suffer some bad time because we did bad things in response. But then about a month later, they went away. They haven't reminded you of it. And did those people who did bad, did they change their character in a fundamental way? No, they just sublimated. They said, okay, well, I better not do that because I'll get caught for sure. They didn't say, oh, I want to be better. I'm going to take away all those desires of wanting what other people have, not caring about what I do to other people. No, you have to change from within. And therefore, if, God or Jesus came to earth and said, hey, if you do bad things, you're not going to be in a good place until you start changing your mind. Well, that's not going to change anybody. You have to change it from within. It's just like laws we have on earth where we should be laws of when you do things, you're punished for that, but not laws for saying, oh, you must do good, right? This is why do-gooders are some of the worst, who causes the worst disasters on earth, because they force people to be good. This is why they had the Soviet gulags. This is why communism doesn't work. You have this small little group of people who think they know best for you. And then if you don't do what they said, they go, you must be evil, because they believe they're morally superior, and then you're locked up or killed. No, you let people learn their own lessons. You if they're doing something against other people, they should be punished, and restrained. But you don't force people to be good. You have to let them come to that own conclusion. They have to do that on their own free will. And that's what the spirit world always does, is we're allowed our own free will. Okay, now here's the observation from Allan Kardec. It was always interesting. Listening to the end of these eloquent and poetic words, we are surprised to hear St. Louis talking about the eternity of suffering when all the superior spirits are in agreement to combat this belief. When the last words, to punish you, God so wants you to believe, explains it all. We reproduce them in the general characteristics of the spirits of the third order. Indeed, the more imperfect the spirits, the more restricted and circumscribed their ideas. For them, the future is vague and they do not understand it. They suffer. Their suffering is long, and those who suffer for a long time, it is like suffering forever. This thought alone is punishment. Now, let's also go to, before I leave that from the miserly point of view, it's very interesting that um, Andre Louise's grandfather, who Andre Louise's grandfather was a very rich person. Andre Louise loved his grandfather, but he was a miser. Yes, and then here's one of the comments is like allowing your child to make mistakes for them to learn. Right. And some people have to learn the hard way. Some people will actually respond and learn by talking, right? But a lot of people, me included, right? And in certain times of your life too, you have to learn the hard way, and then they'll learn it. Instead of you saying, don't do that. And they're always saying, well, then half the time, some children and adults, then they'll do it, right? So yes, it's exactly the same. But let's talk about the miser aspect for a second before I forget. So Henri Louis in the book, and I think it was the book before Liberation, I can't remember the title. He was down in the lower zone, and he saw these spirits like flying around and digging through mud. And these spirits would like pick up pieces of mud or rocks and, we found gold. We found gold. And they were just misers that were just completely still tied to the earth. And they just love gold and they love their wealth. And we've all been there, right? I mean, and hopefully as we get older and more mature, we put it in perspective. I'm sure there's a lot of us who've always put it in perspective. I wasn't. I was enthralled with becoming rich. The price was too high to pay, though, morally. But then he saw this group of spirits. He says, "Oh my, that's my grandfather." And of course, being young, he never thought of him or never heard his family talk about him as being so obsessed and being a miser, but he was. So here's his grandfather who basically parked himself in a life, and all he did, instead of growing spiritually, he concentrated on amassing more wealth. So he got his grandfather and he had him rescued to like an outpost in the lower zone. And he says, "Can you do anything for my grandfather?" Now, this is where, when you read these books and you see these little comments, it opens up how the spirit world works on earth. Because we know, and higher spirits, right, and spirits from heaven, when they can work with their mentors and they work through these intricate plans, blueprints for their lives, so they can learn what they need to learn. And so a lot of the people who are spiritually advanced somewhat, right, they actually took part in the trials and tribulations which they are going through because they want to do it. Some of these can be very harsh because they feel that they have a lot to pay for, because we're here to pay for our past wrongs. And there's groups of spirits around to help them to go through that. But now here's a miser down in the lower zone. Oh, and also, before I forget, lose that train of thought, think of the intricate interconnectedness, right? When someone who is supposed to contribute to society or lead society or be a physician or a scientist, and Allan Kardec himself, right? Allan Kardec incarnated on Earth. What about, they had to plan out his parents, they had to plan out all this, make sure he didn't die of some childhood illness, that a horse and cart didn't run him over with the job he got. All that had to be planned, and they were probably looked at, and he was followed every day by spirits. And I believe that the higher and more important the person, there's more people around, more spirits around them, him or her, to help guide them on what they're doing. In fact, one time I was at this lecture. I worked for a bank, and Tony Blair, ex Prime Minister of England, gave a talk to us. And a person came on, and I was like sitting in like the second row. And then Tony Blair walked on stage, and I just felt my whole arm tingling. That's how I feel like sometimes when I'm having passes made, or I can feel the presence of spirits. And I just feel this tingling, and I really felt it strong. So here is this ex-Prime Minister of England. He must have had spirits around him, either guiding him, giving inspiration, or whatever. I don't know. So anyway, look at the care and planning for spirits who are a little bit higher in the hierarchy. Now we have Andre Louise's grandfather, who was a miser, who was in the lower zones. He took him to this outpost. And he said, "Can you do anything for my grandfather?" They said, "Yeah." He goes, "We're given lots of leeway. We can make a reincarnation plan for him rather quickly." And he goes, "You can?" "Oh, yes. We'll put him in one of these poor sections and he'll live a life as a manual laborer and he'll learn to be humble and he'll never have much money. And this will be good for him. This will get him out of that miser phase." And I'm paraphrasing, right? And I'm adding to it. But it shows you, okay, so for his grandfather, who was probably pretty important, because Andre Louise is a pretty important researcher, right? And wealthy. The next life, he's going to be relatively unimportant. And they'll probably just give him, okay, we'll just find a mother and father for him somewhere in the slums or the tenements. And he'll be born. And there's not going to be any assistance for his birth. He's just, whatever the inheritance is, he's going to be put into this class of society and culture and race, whatever. It shows you, okay, so it shows you there's a hierarchy, even of humans who incarnate on Earth, on the care and planning that is given to them. If you are a worker who is going to help move the Earth forward as far as helping people become more spiritual, helping their culture, maybe technology, whatever that the spirit world wishes to happen to the human race to help us move, to really move to a planet of regeneration, there will be more thought and effort put into your time here on this campus called Earth. If you're just a bystander and here just to go through another phase just to get you up to be a better person, less care and effort will be placed into you. So, does this sound like, well, what God loves us all, right? Jesus loves us all. We're all loved equally. Yes, you're loved equally, but the amount of resources, put into you is based upon what is expected you will do. Now think about that. Think about what that is. It's kind of like Earth. It's kind of like the real world, and that's what's so amazing that Spiritism has brought all this information. Is that there's a lot of similarity, right? And some spirits say that heaven is just Earth perfect, or Earth is heaven imperfect, right? However way you want to look at it, because there's organizations, there's managers, there's workers, there's cities, there's water supply, there's food supply for those in the lower regions. All this is there. And if you really want to do more things, you have to be educated, you have to work. So heaven, Spiritism reveals that heaven isn't this place of the Elysian fields where you go and you play your harp or on the beach and drink cocktails with little umbrellas in them forever, right? Because that really would be hell, as Spirits told Allan Kardec in the Spirits book. Imagine doing nothing for eternity. That would get old. You might like a day or two. Me, of course, whenever I'm on, if I'm on a beach vacation, I don't even plan for it because I can't be that idle. But some people can, and God bless them. But you're going to be working. You're going to be producing. You're going to be learning. And that's why when you read these books, right? You read them carefully, and you see the care and the amount of effort put into Andre Louise's grandfather versus someone coming on a mission to Earth where they actually have spirits help them at birth and modify smallly, right, their DNA sequences to help a trait become better. It tells you a lot. Okay, let me go on the next thing. Oh, this is This is Conversations from Beyond the Grave. This is the evocation of Miss Clary D. So, note, Miss Clary D was an interesting girl who died in 1850 at age 13, who has since then become the genie of the family, where she is frequently evoked and where she gives a large number of communications of the highest interest. The conversation reproduced below occurred between us on January 12th, 1857, through her brother, who is a medium. Okay, question 1. Do you have precise memories of your corporeal existence? And she said, the spirit sees the present, the past, and some of the future, according to their perfection and their proximity to God. As I said, the higher the spirit, they see more of the future. 2, the condition of perfection is relative only to the future, or is it also refers to the present and the past? And she answered, the spirit sees the future more clearly as they get closer to God. After death, the soul sees and embraces at a glance all past lives, but cannot see what God prepares. For that, we need to be fully in God. There are many existences. And it's also what Spiritism tells you is that when that moment of conception and that baby is in the womb, that that soul, that spirit inside the womb, will relive all their past lives and will think about what they their spiritual contract of what they promised to do when they're on earth. Did they promise to improve this or that or whatever? And so they review their past lives, they see where they went wrong, and then they review what is their future plan. Now, some people it helps, some people it doesn't. 3, do you know when your reincarnation will be in 10 or 100 years? He said, on Earth or another world, on another. Well, that's just going to be on another world. So, spirits are placed on whatever world is best for them to learn. Now, again, I want to emphasize this. Your trials and tribulations, people think, I'm being punished. Why is God punishing me? No, they're educating you. Your interpretation of that education is punishment. It's just like when you're in, 7th grade, let's say 7th grade in like the United States, where you're 13 or you're 14. And you think the fact that you have to sit still for 50 minutes is like the worst punishment on earth. And you're starving. Of course, I remember one time where in the state of California, they had this poll, like, 50% of the students say at some time of the day they're starving. Well, of course, when you're 13, 14, 15-year-old, especially boys, you're always starving. It just shows you how inane some of these people are. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a good middle class existence, and there were times when I couldn't wait to eat. So, anyway, I'm editorializing. I should stop that. Okay, only about Spiritism. Okay, number 5, the world where you will be compared to Earth will have better conditions, same on Earth, or inferior. Much better than on Earth. One is happy over there. So she must have been a higher spirit, and she died when she was 13. So she probably didn't come to fulfill anything except to her family, and they probably had her die at an early age so she could talk to her family and help them spiritually, and therefore she was going on to a world, probably a planet of regeneration. Question 6. Since you are here among us, are you in a particular place? Where? I'm ethereal in appearance. I can say that my spirit itself extends much further. I see many things, and I transport myself far from here with the speed of thought. My appearance is right by my brother's side and guides his arm. So, very interesting. Is ethereal, right? Which means you're lighter, you're less dense. And I say my spirit itself extends further. I can see many things. So interesting is we always talk about how we physical people see spirits. They're kind of fuzzy. We see them, kind of transparent, whatever. But how do spirits see us? Well, spirits don't see us as we see us. Spirits see us as the level of our spirituality. If we are very materialistic and cruel, we look very dark. They see our aura. And then they also see some of our future, as you said, as depending on your level. but they see us as somewhat dark if we have very little spirituality. Um, so, and when Andre Luis, I think it was in the book The Messengers, he first came, no, he came to Earth, he saw all these people that were like dark clouds around them. He said, "What's that?" No, that's the state of the spirit this person's in. That's their spiritual state. They're thinking of, you know, revenge, making more money, doing something illegal, something like that, right? They're not thinking of helping someone. They're not thinking of being with their loving family, right? They're thinking of something that's in more of a primitive emotion. It's all there. We are an open book to the spirit world, right? We all, when we were growing up, our mother says, if you can't say something, nice, don't say something at all. Well, that doesn't even work in the spirit world because they can see our thoughts. That's why we're on earth. We're really on earth to what? Reprogram, rewire our brain. Stop gossiping. Stop malicious gossip. Start thinking nice about people. It's hard. I've been doing this for years and years and years. I'm still not where I want to be, but I am getting better. Number 7, this ethereal body that dresses you up allows you to experience physical sensations such as heat and cold. When I remember much of my body, I feel a sort of impression as when a blanket is removed from you, and for some time, you still keep the sensation that you have it on. And yes, in fact, Andre Louis was saying that, or maybe it was Leon Denis, was saying that, spirits are just happy to get rid of this physical body because you feel like you're wearing this heavy diving suit. And when you just feel free and lighter when you're a spirit, and of course you're healthier and you look, and you're never sick, you don't grow old, anything. 8, you said you can move at the speed of thought. Isn't the thought the soul itself, which detaches from its covering? The answer is yes. So that, again, this tells us so much. Isn't the thought the soul itself, which attaches from its covering? The answer is yes. That's what we are. We are modules, encapsulated modules of logic, of thought, of intelligence, right? We're part of that intelligent that infuses universal fluid. And what we are is, when we want, or when other people want to see us, if another spirit sees us, we can look like our paraspirit sees us, right? Our outer covering, our young covering, good looking covering, with a robe, and whatever we want to wear. And then when we are in the physical, our spirit's connected to the paraspirit, which connects to every cell in our body. And then we're still thought, right? And when the body dies, it's no big deal. It's just like you took off a coat, and then you're back into this thought. Now, this thought is miraculous because people don't think of themselves as thought, right? They think of themselves like, I'm a physical human being. I have feelings. I have wants. I have desires. I love. I'm not a machine. Well, we are the most complicated pieces of logic that you can believe that we have no concept of. You could say, and we are these pieces of logic that have matured enough to be able to by the speed of thought, because there's no speed of light in the spirit universe, we can move around the universe given the level that we are as a spirit. We can move around all the data, all the information that's alive information that's connected to all other information. And we can look at the information as data as itself, and connections as itself, are as the parameters and what's the word I'm looking for? Properties of it is how it wants to be represented. And this is why it's a very one time. Oh, okay. Let me bring this up. Hold on a second. Okay. When does the soul enter the fetus? Is it in conception or later time? I'm asking because I had a dream where I was told that I was light, and then I felt like light traveling through the universe. So this was described and I forgot which book. Oh yeah, and then it says later, then guided to my mother's womb. Okay, let me describe it. I have an article on that, actually. I may have a video too. This was described in one of the Chico Xavier's book, Andre Louise's series. So they had a couple, and they took the couple into the spirit world to meet their prospective baby. Now, they may have known that baby, like you, that they may have been your parents before in a previous, what's happened, right? Family groups tend to incarnate together. They may have been that before. But let's just say they weren't, or whatever. They were taken of the spirit world to meet you, and you got to meet them, and they said, "Oh, how cute you are," right? All that. So Andre Louise went with a group, and they let the mother and father go to the room together, gave them privacy, and then when they fell asleep, as the sperm came up through the through the uterus, and then a lot of times spirit world will pick who's the victor. They'll know. I've read that. When that hits the egg, it's like a little flash of light. In fact, actually, science have seen there's a flash of light when it happens. You, as a spirit, is kind of like a mollusk, right? You cover your mother, and then you go down, 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 down in size until you are encapsulated in that single or dual single celled egg, and you're there. So it happens at the moment of conception. Now I see someone commented, said I heard it 5 months. Well, that's not what Spiritism says. It is at the moment of conception that that soul, who is going to be your son or daughter, is in the mother's womb, and that's why it's very important to be very careful, as everybody knows, to be very careful with that baby, because that's in their plan. Let me hide this one. And then he says, so I was traveling through the universe and guided to my mother's room. Yes. In fact, what happens is, so you were given some help, right? You must have been in some level of heaven already, and you have that memory. Now, for the lower spirits, let's say like Andre Louise's grandfather I was talking about, who's just going to be reincarnated, they have this urge that they can't deny. It's this magnetic urge that they have to go to that place and absorb themselves into that moment. It's just, it's just irrepressible. So, I hope that's interesting. And then he says, the soul as thought is amazing. So it is amazing, and it's hard to get yourself around it, your mind around it, because we see with our eyes. Everything is thought. It's created by thought, and the spirits tell us everything in the spirit world is created by thought. The houses, the scenery, everything. It goes, and the physical world was created by the spirit world. And so that wall you see behind me, to me, it's solid, right? This head is solid. I can't go through it. But in actuality, it is an object that was created by thought. Now we think it's created by people working with like brick or wood, right? Or plasterboard. And it is, right? Because those people think and they create these things, but everything's held in place. The fact the physical universe is held in place by the will of higher spirits. It doesn't mean have to concentrate all the time. It's just, we're gonna create this planet called Earth. It's going to serve as a campus. So and then spirits also say we can only see as physical beings about 1/8 of the world around us. So what you have to look at is if we're still thought, but now we are encapsulated in this other covering, where we're only allowed to see objects not as we should be able to see them as a spirit, as malleable and things that we can change. But when we see an object, it's is as spirits say, we live in an objective world. We cannot make changes through our thoughts. I cannot change that wall behind me. I cannot change that wood table into something else. I don't have that power. And I'm not supposed to have that power because I'm supposed to be on earth to let stimuli affect me so I can change my personality and my character. But then when you go to the spirit world, you have this paraspirit. Let me show you the paraspirit, which is your idea of how you look. Which is a spirit, which is energy and all your experiences. You have access to all your past life memories if you're allowed, right? Sometimes they won't allow you. It's too much for some people. And as you rise as a spirit, and I talk about this, as you rise as a spirit, you have more and more attributes, and you can do more and more things. You can access the universal database more. All sorts of things you can do more. But then you also have this paraspirit, which is your connection to your body. Okay, so what would be the use of me having that dream? Well, the use is that you just came here and told me about the dream, and the use is that you were given clues that there is something more to you than just being a carbon-based life form that's going to die and be lost forever. The use is that you were given this little hint that you are more than just that of what you see in the mirror. That little hint that makes you interested in something beyond your physical life. That would be the use of that dream. Okay, let me finish. I'm almost done here. Okay. When your thoughts move to a given region, how does the separation of the soul take place? The appearance vanishes, the thought goes alone, right? So your thought goes there, and then people see you as you want to be seen, and then you go somewhere else. And as the spirits say, there's no such thing as distance. There's absence or presence. And how could that be if we live in a physical world that there's no distance, right? Number 10, is there therefore a faculty that stands out the actual being stays put? He said the form is not the being. No, right? The form is just a set of properties of the representation that are there for other people to see. And when that spirit leaves, those properties leaves with the spirit, and that form is gone. But how does thought act? Is it not always through matter? No, not through matter. When your thinking faculty stands out, don't you act then by means of matter? She said the shadow fades away and reproduces wherever the thought may guide it. Interesting, is it not? Number 13, considering that you were only 13-year-olds when your body died, how can you give us answers beyond the reach of a child of that age about such abstract questions? And the answer is, my soul is very old. So, yes. So, 14, among your previous existence, can you mention one in which you would raise your knowledge most? I was in the body of a man who I made a virtuoso. After his death, I was in the body of a girl whose face stamped my own soul. God rewards me. Could we be allowed to see you as you hear now? You could. How could that be? It depends on us or on you or those closest to you. On you. Which conditions would be satisfied to obtain that? You need to be secluded for some time with faith and fervor. You need to be in a small group. You need some isolation in a medium like home. So I thought that'd be interesting. Okay, let me oh, and this is an answer to someone who on the other question, what would be the use of me having that dream? And of course, the hint, a reminder, a signal. And I talk about this, and we go through life. We go through life, all the time. Just thinking that we are, that everything's happened to us by randomness, and it doesn't. There's all sorts of signs and signals of the world. And I actually have my book, The Seven Tenets of Spiritism, which you can see right back there, where I talk about how I see the signs and signals of when I finally found Spiritism. I was started staying awake and knowing through synchronicities. Even Carl Jung talked about synchronicities. And what was there? What was the earth? What was the spirit world trying to tell us here on earth? And it says, okay, then what allows you to access that database? Well, that is the function of a spirit. In fact, you're trained when you go to heaven. They train you. In fact, I talk about in my book. Let me find it. I talk about in this book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, how spirits are trained. So when you go and you're in heaven, you may be illiterate and they have to train you to read and write. Although, let's say, you probably knew that in your previous life, but you weren't allowed to know your previous life yet. So they train you. So you're trained how to volitate, means move by thought, and then you also are trained on how to access that database. And in fact, in this book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, is book 2. My first book is 7 and Below. There is this passage where Spirit talks about training other spirits of how to do that. And he has these students, and he goes to this grassy field, and he lays them on the grass. He goes, okay, now close your eyes and concentrate on something. And what do you see? And he goes, well, and then he can tell by reading their minds, he can tell what they see. And he goes to this one young lady. He goes, what do you see? He goes, well, I think I see this person with a light on there. And he puts his hand on her forehead. He goes, well, what you're seeing is 2 people, and they just kind of merge together because they're on a higher plane. And you are taught how to access that database. And in fact, if you're interested in mediumship, you should read Allan Kardec's The Book of Mediums. But what I hadn't seen in that Book of Mediums is I knew a medium in Rio de Janeiro, a really great guy. And he didn't talk to spirits. He had that ability to access the database. And he would say, well, Brian, when you were writing this book, did you think of this, this, and this? And I could tell that he was following data connections, right? He wasn't being told what a high spirit told him. So he'd have that knowledge, right? And he'd have that sentence, right? He would just kind of, it was very unusual. And I could see when he misinterpreted things, he had some concept, but I could, okay, yeah, he misinterpreted that. And it was very interesting. So imagine that. Imagine, you've got the internet, the universal internet of every planet, everything, which of course you don't tell your higher spirit, right? But at least, on your local area, on your local intranet, you've got everything there. And, you can go back and access that database and see, okay, what did Napoleon really do at the Battle of Waterloo? What did he tell Marshal Ney? Right? All interesting things. Okay, then during the last 10 years, I've had many vivid dreams that make what you talk about a very real matter to me. I've seen myself in outer space and other places. Yeah. You've traveled. Yeah, and you've probably seen maybe you may have seen yourself on other planets. You may have seen yourself of what a possible future's planned for you. So I've gone way over my time. And yes, I'll maybe write this one other comment because this is so true. Intuitions over intellect. And I just want to leave by this, is that we're not here to become geniuses or wealthy billionaires, right? We're here to become loving and wise. And what is being wise? That is knowledge with empathy and caring and love. And then the intuition is kind of that whole personality of when you have wisdom and you're loving, right? Because then you know the right thing to do. You understand the right thing to do. So yeah, I love what you said from I Love Zamba, right? The person who did that. So yes, it's a good point. Okay, I've gone 10 minutes over. And so, but I love these questions. And remember, on Mondays at the same time as was tonight on Sunday, I have the whole hour of just Q&A on Spiritism. So you can ask me anything you want. But again, I would recommend you read the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. You go to my website, nwspiritism.com, and that will show you on the right-hand side all my books. And of course, on my book, Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation, you can download that for free. It's on PDF. And of course, it's also on Kindle and Audible and paperback, but you can download it for free on PDF. It's also in French. Someone translated that. So, that will give you a good, it's only 99 pages or 100 pages. I can't remember. Give you a good overview. Then I would read the Spirits book. All depends how you want to learn, but it will open up a whole new world for you. So what I want to say is God bless to everyone.